And welcome back to the Wrap Up to the Retirement podcast with your host, Dan Reese. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing really, really well. I'm enjoying this series a lot. And for listeners who are just joining us, this is a series about preparing to exit the business that you've owned for a long time and how to best go about doing that. It's a terrific series. I would urge you to go back and check the earlier episodes if you haven't already. But this one today is interesting, Dan, because you're talking about building and increasing the value. So take us there.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through a lot of different areas here. And the last time we talked about the importance of protecting your business, which I will tell you from a financial planning standpoint, you always protect first. You know, it's just like if you're working with a family, hey, do you have the right amount of life insurance in place and in disability and things? Because if you don't and you haven't protected yourself, then the saving strategies and everything else, you know, could still work. But if something were to happen, you're going to be in a load of trouble, right?
Yep.
And that same thing applies to a business. And so today we get to get into the fun stuff, like, you know, more along the lines of how do we make this thing more valuable, you know, moving forward. And so it's exciting to get into this stuff.
And as you have said on a number of occasions in conversations with me and on a prior podcast, the value of your company can be measured in finances, but the value of your company is not just financial. So explain that one.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge, huge point. So financials are super important. Anybody that's going to buy a company, that's one of the first things they're going to want, right? Like, let's see how your business is actually doing, you know? And really, if you think about it, it's just like when you file a tax return. So we just you filed tax returns. Okay. What was that for? Was that for now or was that from before? Well, it was last year, right? So financials are always like from the past. It's looking backwards. How did things look or what has happened over time?
Yes.
They're not forward looking. And so anybody that, you know, has gone to school for finance and they've kind of evaluated even stocks, like you say, oh, evaluate IBM or whoever, right? What are they really concerned with? They're concerned with the outlook for the future, right? They want to know future, what's the expected future revenues and what are all those things? Because that's going to determine where that company goes, right? And so it's so important when you start looking at it because buyers are looking at the future. Like, I mean, you just take, again, going back to stocks, there's nobody out there that's going to be, man, I want to look for a company that's going down the drain. I want something that's, you know, the outlooks are bad. They're probably not going to be in business in a year. That's what I want to buy.
Yeah, that's the one I want to go for. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they want companies that they think are going to do well in the future, right? And it's the same thing with a family-owned business. And so as you get into that, what really drives that, or what we're going to call or basically talk about is the intangible factors of the company. And there's 4 key ones that we're going to discuss, but that's really what we want to focus on today, because these are areas that you can greatly improve, right? That are going to drive your business valuation higher. So if you take it where I've been, and then if you fulfill these 4 areas and where you've been's already been good, this is really going to skyrocket your company value. And it's going to make a whole lot of buyers be like, I want that company, because, you know, they've got a lot going for it.
Don't keep us waiting here, Dan. What are these intangible values?
Yeah. And so there's really 4 key things. The first one's human capital. That's who works with you. You know what I mean? What's your team look like?
Oh, sure.
And so that is a huge piece because, you know, the better your team, and we'll get into that, you know, people are like, they're buying your team in essence, right? If you sell your company, that, you know, hopefully most of those people are going to stick around and they want good people. And that basically human capital is a huge factor in doing that. The next one's your customer capital. You know, we talked a little bit in the last one about protection. Well, customer capital, they're buying again your customers, right? So like, what types of customers are they? Are they very transient, where you don't know from month to month, you know, who's going to show up at your door? Are they very consistent, and do they buy your goods and services regularly, or do they maybe even have reoccurring contracts or long-term contracts, right? So looking at that customer capital. The third one's going to be your structural capital. You know what that is? That's like, how's your business run? Do people walk into work every day and it's very organized and structured where people have defined jobs that they do. They have standing operating procedures, how to do it, all those things, that's that structural capital. And it's just like anything. When you have a strong foundation, everything else is strong. If you have a weak foundation, your company's weak and it's not going to be as valuable. And the last one a lot of people might not think as much about is really social capital. So social capital is a really interesting area because think of it this way, it's how people in the community in your customer base see you, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense because if you're not well thought of, if you're or not thought of at all,
Yeah.
that's very different than people having a great opinion of your business and a great opinion of the people that they may have encountered that work with you and for you.
Yes, there's no question. And we'll get into these more in detail, but the biggest thing to understand is like if there's buyers out there looking at different companies, you could have the same exact financials. You literally could have the same financials. But one of them might be kind of like held together with super glue and duct tape, one company.
Yeah.
And the other one may be like the owner could leave for a month and no one would even know because they're run so well and everything's driven with procedures and great people and all these things. Guess which one they're going to pay a whole lot more money for?
Oh, that's easy.
That's what we want to get today. We want to get everyone out there understanding ways and things you can do to improve these areas so that your company can be worth more and you're the company buyers want compared to your competitor.
Well, let's break that down then. Let's break those 4 areas down because this is interesting.
Yeah, let's get into human capital first of all. So the first thing you want to think about is your leadership bench strength. So in the past, you've had a lot of these businesses where the owner kind of did everything. They were in charge of everything, they knew everything. Other people didn't, and you've heard many stories of they got sick or something happened and that business frankly didn't survive very long.
No.
And if it did, it was very, very challenging to do so, right? And so the idea is with leadership bench strength is like, let's build that out. Let's start having other people in our organization that can do some of these things so that it's not all on one person. Cross training, so other people understand different people's roles. So like if something were to happen, they could jump in, they could help out and do those things until someone else got up to speed, a replacement person and things like that. So it's kind of common sense in a lot of ways, but as leaders of companies and especially family-owned businesses, it can be extremely challenging and hurt our pride to do that. So we want to make sure that we're open and say this is the best because ultimately remember as a business owner, it's not just you it affects all your employees. It affects, all those families that you support through your payroll and everything else. It affects all your customers that depend on you for things. And so that can maybe, if you look at it through that lens, it may allow you to bring your guard down a little bit and say, hey, I got to let go of some of this stuff. I got to allow other people to come into the picture and help with it.
Well, yeah, because that helps with a lot of different aspects that I'm sure you're going to get into. But when you start delegating it out, when you start sharing the leadership responsibilities, its impact it can be felt down the line in a number of different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's just good business. It really is when you start, really diversifying those leaders and things. The other thing that a lot of people don't put probably enough thought into, which is part of human capital, is successor readiness. So like a lot of times you've got in your head, and sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Oh, my daughter's going to take over, or my son's going to take over, or you know what? These key employees are going to take over. Well, part of being a good owner and part of really value acceleration in a business to prepare for exits is to not just think that's the case, to talk to people about it, to actually have conversations and say, hey, what do you think about this? You might find out your daughter's like, Dad, no, I'm not taking that over.
Everybody's got stories. There's a guy I know, he ended up taking over the family business, but only after his siblings were all like, there's no way we want to do this.
Yeah, it happens way more than you think because a lot of owners think everybody would want to do this. Well, you may be surprised, but that successor readiness is all about kind of, having that worked out, having a game plan in place and involving the people so that because what that allows you to do is if the idea you had in your head ends up being not a reality, then you can move on because there's several different ways to move a business on to a new owner. And, you got to understand them all, which is a whole different area. And we'll get into it later in one of the other podcasts coming up. But, the big thing is then you have to realize if that's even a reality for you, could that work that way? So big deal. And then one last thing around human capital is what we call incentive alignment. And what that means is that you need to have everybody working on the same, like for the same goal. The most profitable companies have some profit tie-in, bonuses, different things like that.
Mm.
And it's beyond. One of the ways you transfer a company is what's called an ESOP. And, where it's basically you get some employee ownership in a company. Those companies tend to outperform non-ESOP companies if you look at all the numbers around them. So what it shows you is that if you can kind of create your compensation around your human capital so everybody's on the same page, and so everybody wins when you do well, and maybe there's a little price to pay too when you don't do well, right? So it's kind of everybody's on the same page where they want things to be successful. I've heard results going all the way back to like supplies they order where, people will be like, whoa, I don't know if we really need that supply. Like I think we're okay because they realize that's an expense and that might affect the bonus at the end of the year. And it sounds simple, but that stuff adds up over time when everybody's thinking along those lines. So that's a really important one.
Yeah, many people make up big solutions, actually. It's very true. So that's human capital. If I remember correctly, the next one on that list is customer capital. What's that about?
Yeah, customer capitals, that's what drives your business, right? And so again, if you're looking at a business from through the buyer's lens, the more diverse that your customers are, the more reoccurring revenue you have and all that, the better. So let's talk about how can you build that, right? Well, you can look at your numbers and say, okay, if you're not diverse, then you need to start talking to your sales department and saying, okay, how can we, broaden our customer base? What are things we can do from a marketing standpoint to maybe get into some, different markets that are going to allow us to have a broader group of clients so that helps us be more valuable and not so reliant on one or two. The next thing is like, are there things we could do to create reoccurring revenue? We talk about that all the time. People love reoccurring revenue when they're buying businesses. You've seen recently a lot of these small, community insurance agencies, like these independent insurance agencies, have sold for quite a bit of money because guess what? They have reoccurring revenue. You know what I mean? People renew and every year they get paid again, right? And so think about that when you're running your own business. Are there things that you could do to find programs, or maybe that's a service program where you're like, hey, for $25 a month, we'll do these things for you. Or, there's a million ideas out there of things you could do to create some reoccurring revenue.
Yep.
But that's a huge, huge deal. Contracts with people, you get contractually into, we're going to do this for you. We're going to provide these goods or services for a set amount, and it's for some period of time. That's very valuable because if somebody's coming in and buying, you're like, oh, they've got all these contracts that are already in place. So we know when we're buying it that's going to be there, and we're not going to have all our customers leave, right?
No, totally. I get it. I mean, I knew a commercial real estate developer, and he decided I should add a little reoccurring revenue here. So he created a division within his company that maintains, that does the maintenance, does all the parking lots and the whole bit. But it's a maintenance division that he sets up contracts with the people who then occupy the commercial businesses that he developed. So that, yeah, I get your point. And it's like, it makes his business thousands of times more attractive.
Oh, that's an awesome idea. And guess what? It's super valuable. I have a commercial building. You know what? That's the last thing I want to think about. If somebody came in and said, hey, we'll manage the whole interior, exterior for a reasonable price, I would probably be like, absolutely.
I'm there. Do it. Exactly.
That's a great example, Bill, of the things that, there's ideas. There's tons of ideas. You just have to sit down and think about them, and it's going to help your business. And it also can take some stress away when time if you have some like volatile month to month sales.
Well, yeah, and we all know real estate moves in cycles, so that it's like you want to smooth those cycles out a little bit. In that particular instance, you want to smooth that cycle out. There it is.
Yeah. In the last area around the customer capital to think about is are your relationships, are they transferable? You know what I mean? If you're going to sell something, is that agreement just with you or is it with the company? That's important to think about. Because the reality is like if somebody's buying it and all of a sudden all those agreements you have are null and void, they're going to be like, well, that's not even, we can't even count that in the transaction.
Totally true. Structural. This one would intrigue me, the structural capital.
I think this is such a huge thing. And with today's technology in the world, there's not a lot of excuses not to have this in place. Structural capital is really about the day to day, how you run your business. When people come in, do they have, very well defined job duties? Do they have well defined ways that they do those jobs? Do they have how do they interact with other departments? All these things, the more specific your company is with how you do things, the more valuable you're going to be, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's lots of tools out there to help create these standard operating procedures. The other thing that people need to think about, it's not just like standard operating procedures for your employees, but also systems maybe you use that interact with your customers. Like how smooth are those systems? Say you need to order things from different suppliers. Can you get online and just do that? Or is it more rigorous than that? So those types of systems. Think about your going back a little bit to your customer capital. How do you have all the records on them, right? Do you have a good client management system where you can pull them up and be like, oh, Acme, Metals ordered all this from us in the last 30 days, or I called and talked to them, could you pull up your database, know exactly every conversation you had with that customer, over the last 6 months? Is that all recorded? I mean, because if you're thinking about all that stuff, because I can tell you what's coming because I've already seen it, the more data you have like that, the better records, the better things you have around your procedures, your customers. AI is going to come in and is going to give you a huge advantage on insights around them, what might be helpful for them as customers, all kinds of things. But if you don't have all those in place, you're going to, oh, did somebody talk to Bob over at Acme last week? I don't know. I mean, maybe it was Susie. I'm not really sure. You get the point is that you can greatly increase the value of your company just by having a good client management system where you have regular records.
Well, this goes back to something that you talked about in the last episode, which is, the dreaded P word, process. Have you documented your process? Do you have all of this stuff down so that, when somebody comes in, they're not relying on your employees to say, well, these are the things I do.
Yeah.
Your structure's sound. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. And those jobs, should they need to be filled, aren't mystery jobs anymore. It's like, oh, we need somebody to do these things, right?
100%. It's a lot easier to hire. It's a lot easier to get them up and running when they know exactly what they're doing and what their responsibilities are. And it's funny when you bring up like procedures you're talking about and people like, oh, the dreaded procedure. Couple quick instances. So pilots always use checklists, right? Because they have too much to lose. So they literally, no matter how many flights, they have a checklist, right? Back several years ago, there was a lot of issues in operating rooms across the country in hospitals with infections and all these other things. And so they started going to some of these checklists, which seems so like, well, they know what they're doing. They're doctors and things. Well, guess what? When they went to the checklist, all of a sudden the mistakes went way down. They went way down. And even one other quick example, like Brent that works in the office with us here, he years ago when he first got out of college, he sold, and actually for several years he had like a cell phone company. He sold cell phones and everything like that. And he'll tell the story like when he started doing that, when he went through his training, they had a very specific process. And what he would find is as he was doing that, things were going great. And then he would stop following the process. And then all of a sudden he's like, my sales went to crap. And he's like, I looked and said, oh, you know what? I'm not following that process anymore. And So there's countless examples of why procedures and processes create better results. And if you're a buyer of a company, you love the if when you see the company you're looking at buying has really good procedures and processes in place, it's just going to push the value way up for them.
Yeah, yeah. And for the longtime listeners, you've met Brent on prior podcasts. You can give him a call and bust his chops if you want to.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So this was the one that stumped me, and I mean, in a sense, social capital, because we understand, or at least I understand, the value of how well you're thought of in the community, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is one. If someone were making a list, they probably would get the first three in terms of the what capitals. But this one may be the one that eludes people probably the most often.
Yeah. And I will tell you a little story, my own personal story. So I worked when I came out of college, I worked for State Farm and I worked in claims and I worked for the company. And then eventually for a short period of time, went into agency and it wasn't for me. Great experience, just wasn't for me. But State Farm historically has been seen in a very positive light when you look at surveys, you look at how people view them as a company and everything. And so when we get into social capital, one of the things that they would train their agents as they were developing agents to put out in communities was, hey, you need to get involved. You need to be on school boards. You need to coach. Maybe you be the mayor or whatever, but you need to be involved in the community.
Yeah.
Because what they knew was that if you developed that social capital, if you developed that social capital and you were a good person and you were out showing that you were a good person in the community, that did nothing but positive things for your business, right? You would get more customers, right? So if you look at what it truly is, it's no different today. Companies that are seen in a positive light, they've got employees out in the community doing positive things, volunteering, coaching, doing a lot of different things. And on top of that, they've shown that they're going to stand behind their product or service that they produce. So when bad things happen, they're going to be, hey, we're going to take care of it. And they show that they're going to always be a good person, not only in the community, but in the business. You're building social capital. And that social capital is, I mean, extremely valuable, extremely valuable. And you've seen it through the years in many, many companies. And I'll tell you nowadays, even like you look at Google reviews, that's social capital,
That's a good point.
right? So people are out looking and they're like, look at all these people that work with, so and so, and they love them. Like all these positive comments of how well they're treated and all these things. That's social capital. And in today, people want social proof. And so all that stuff just works together. And as you build that really strong social capital, your value, your business goes way up. Because people in the key is it's the business, not just you as an owner, right? So it's got to be more than just you. Like it helps if you're out there doing that stuff as an owner, but you know what I mean? It's really everybody.
Totally understand it. So, Dan, how do all of these different intangibles show up when it comes time to you're ready to exit the company and you're entertaining, different buyers?
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality is, let's get back to what we started with. The financials show the past. So that's super important to a buyer.
True.
They want to know that stuff. But the intangibles are going to kind of tell a story about the future. And so when you sell a business, you're going to find that they're going to there's a lot of factors that go in, but it comes down to multiples, like, EBITDA and all that, and how many multiples you get and all that. We've talked about a little about that before in a different episode. So the stronger your the four capitals are, the higher your multiples, very simply. And so that can be a massive, massive difference in, if you think about I'm getting 4 times EBITDA versus 2, that's pretty massive, right? And I will tell you, it's not just that. I talked to a business, basically one of the people that go in and help businesses work through a lot of these issues. And he told me a funny story. He was like, we started working through this process and really improving all these areas. And this business owner had told me, I want to be out in a year. 6 months later, all of a sudden, everything was working so much better. He was like, I don't want to be out. This is great. All of a sudden, my business, which was causing me a bunch of stress, is now fun,
Yeah.
and so it's like, if you're having fun in the business because you've addressed these issues, guess how valuable you are now to a buyer, because they're like, "That is a great business."
Yeah, no kidding. I can imagine that because buyers really, well, they're looking at the health, they're looking at the organization, and what it really comes down to, Dan, isn't it? They're looking at it and they're going, how sound, how solid is this? Because what they really are getting at is if it's a firm, good, sound company, it can be scaled. It can pretty, no guarantees in life, of course, but it can be pretty much assumed that it's like it has the standing to continue, right?
Well, and I'll tell you another thing. This is just a sidebar on that. You reminded me when you said scale. I've heard stories of, like, say you own this business that does widgets and you see another competitor that does widgets. And that business, the other competitor actually has all these strong four C's. And then all of a sudden you're like, they have gone in and bought them to basically almost redo their business. Does that make sense? Like, it's like, we're going to integrate we're not doing it the other way. We're integrating our business into theirs because they've got all that stuff in place.
Makes sense? Sure.
And so you talk about scaling, you are absolutely right. When you have good systems, good people, good diverse customers, all those things are in place, guess what? It's a lot easier, like, to build it bigger. And in on the flip side, if you don't have those things when you start building, oftentimes you've got more problems than you could ever imagine, right?
Yep. Well, I mean, look, here's an easy analogy. Nobody wants to, there are people who will go in and buy houses that are falling apart. Okay. And they're going to do it for one or two reasons. One, they're just going to tear that bad house down,
Yeah.
or they think I've got a vision and I like the bones of this, but they're not going to pay a premium for it. They're not going to pay a premium for that property. And it's the same thing with the business, right?
Yep. 100%. That is 100% right. And so, yeah, like I've said it a million times, I always go back to look at it like through the lens of the buyer, and would you buy your own business? And truly, if you were being impartial to it.
Yeah. Well, again, that's true. And back to what we talked about last time, and it's a repeated theme. Sometimes it's also better if you just bring somebody in from outside to take a look at that, right? I mean,
Yep. Yep.
and offer you some advice as a disinterested third party. And they can say to you, hey, Dan, and they can help you identify the weak links. They can help you identify the areas that need to be improved, right?
Yeah, that's 100%. That's really, just kind of closing it up. So the reality is like, truly look at it objectively, those four areas, and grade yourself. And a little trick, I think we've talked about this before. Some of the tools we use, you get to grade yourself from a 1 to a 6. You're like, no, I don't like that. I want to be a 3. Well, you can't be like, there's no middle, you can be a 3, but that's like slightly below average. There's no like 1 to 5 where I can pick 3 in the safe zone. So, like, grade yourself in these different areas on 1 to 6 and see how you come out. And you'll get a better view of it so that you can understand, hey, these are areas we need to start working on. And 100%, Bill, like, there are so many great specialists out there that can come into your business, partner with you, help you figure all this stuff out so that you can make progress much quicker.
And, it's like you said earlier, it's like sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money to make yourself better and stronger. And hey, there's always a possibility, like the guy you were talking about just a couple of minutes ago, you get it all straightened out and you think, wait, this is a whole lot more fun. I don't think I want to leave just yet.
There's been a ton of stories like that because honestly, a lot of times people get ready to sell is because they're frustrated more than they really want to sell.
So true. So anybody who's listening to this, any business owners out there who are not clients of yours already, who want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to do that, Dan?
Yeah, you can always call our office. Best thing to do is go to our website, averywealth.com. All our contact information's there. But really, there's a lot of business owner insights on our webpage that I think are pretty valuable, honestly, if you take some time to look at them. But yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to chat. Like I say, I'm a business owner. I go through a lot of these things. I deal with a lot of these things. I love it, to be honest with you. I think it's a great thing because as the improvements I've made in my own business over the last several years have been great, and they've allowed me to really have more freedom and have a better business, and which in turn makes it more valuable. So for others, if to the point where I want to exit. And so yeah, just give me a call. I'm happy to chat for a while on the phone, have coffee, whatever, and talk about some of these things. And then I've got so many great resources to help, depending on what your needs might be. Whether you need a specialist to come in and help you kind of identify some of these things where you can start improving, whatever it is, we can kind of figure that out and go from there.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize this. If Dan's making sense to you and you're not a client of his, that initial conversation is not going to cost you a penny. It may cost you a cup of coffee, okay?
Yeah.
Depending, but there's no obligation with it. So do reach out to Dan. You might find the conversation is very fruitful and very positive, as a matter of fact. The other thing you can do that doesn't cost you anything is hit the follow button and become a subscriber. Being a subscriber, you're notified every time Dan drops a new episode, and you can give that a listen. I'd also say, hey, if you like this podcast, let people know about it. Okay, give it a like, tell people, because word of mouth promotion is very, very valuable, and we'd very much appreciate it. So until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Dan and everybody at Avery Wealth, thank you for taking the time to listen today, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening to Ramp Up Your Retirement. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.averywealth.com or give us a call at 517-783-1695. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Avery Wealth. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The opinions voiced in Ramp Up to Retirement with Dan Reese are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on the show may not be affiliated with CWM LLC. Views and comments by guests may not be representative of CWM LLC. Investment advisory services are offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.